Hello, everybody. I'm Mish from Twisted by Mish.
And I'm Innerji, the Metaphysical Crone. How are you today? Hi, Mish. How are you doing?
Hi, Leslie. Hi. So I'm good. I'm good. I'm excited about our next series and talking about Samhain.
I know this is I have to say, of all the Sabbats, this is the one that probably has the most meaning for me out of all of them.
Yeah, I think for me too. It's sort of something that even before following my pagan journey, something that around this time of year, honoring ancestors and things like that was something that has always happened at this time of year with me growing up, with Anzac Day and things like that.
Yeah, for me, it's the same. It goes back to my early childhood when I was living in Scotland. Yes, we called it Halloween, but we still did some of the traditional things, which I will talk about in a little while as well. But I thought we might start by just reminding people of the dates. The traditional dates are the 30th of April through to the 1st of May. And the reason that there are two dates was that traditionally the Celtic day began at sunset, not sunrise. So that's why it covers the 2 days. And then astrologically, it occurs at 15 degrees Taurus. So that's the halfway point when the sun is in Taurus, and that occurs on the 6th of May. And it is also a full moon in Scorpio, because whenever we have the sun in one and we have a full moon, it's on the opposite side of the astrological wheel, which is Scorpio. And when you think about Samhain, going into the dark, going into the deep, reflection, connecting with ancestors, moon in Scorpio is perfect.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. So what are some of the things that you like to do for Samhain?
For Samhain, well, number one, there's Anzac Day for us. Remembering the family members of So with Anzac Day, we've always commemorated Anzac Day. One of my great uncles was one of the fallen who was over there in World War One. So we've always done Anzac Day commemorations and just, remembering those who have been here before us. Other things I do as well as that is remembering the family, the family that have passed away. And a huge thing for me is remembering their cooking. Food at celebration times and get-togethers was always a really big thing. So for me to create dishes that my great-grandparents or my grandparents or aunties and had created, then that's a big way of remembrance for me.
And a really practical tradition as well. And considering, Samhain in its own way is a celebration.
Yeah, and I feel like it's a really good way to connect with them, because I'm cooking what they cooked, to the best of my abilities anyway. So yeah, I just find that a really nice way to connect with them.
And there is one old tradition that around that time, and it happens in different cultures at different dates for different reasons, but you would set a place for those dear ones who had departed around the table that the whole family would sit and have their celebration feast of Samhain as a mark of respect.
Yeah, leaving a seat. Another one that is very common is to have a dumb supper. So to sit and eat in silence, remembering them.
Yes.
Well, other things I do for Samhain, it's the beginning and the end of the year. Of the pagan year, it's the beginning and the end. So it's a full reminder of that full circle, of birth and rebirth, birth, death, and rebirth. So So yeah, so it's just, then there's the reflection of yourself, reflecting over what you've achieved over the past year, and thinking about what you're going to do going forward. There's really, I think Samhain for me has the most. I do the most things. So yeah, that's just, yeah, it's a lot, but it's a really special time, I feel.
Sound is a very internal time for me. It's less about what I do on the outside, but more about what I do within energetically. It's also a time of remembrance of my heritage as well. You know, growing up in Scotland, you know, in the early 1960s, don't count that. But growing up there when I was a young child, we did do traditions that at the time I didn't know were ancient traditions. And so I thought I would talk a little bit about some of those traditions if you think we have time.
Yeah, that I'd love to hear.
So in Scotland anyway, and I'm sure it happened in other countries as well, but it was a celebration. It was leading into the dark half of the year. And so bonfires were lit to keep the home fires burning. But also, too, some of the celebrations, we talk about trick or treat and Halloween. That's kind of like the modern day fun side, if you like, that certainly was very strong in America and is becoming more strong here in Australia, I believe. But it's actually based on the first recording of the stories in 16th century Scotland, where people would dress up in costume and they would go door to door and they would either sing a song or recite a rhyme in exchange for food. So that's the treat part. The trick part was young men would either wear masks or they would blacken their faces or paint their faces, and they would go from house to house saying that mischief would occur if they were not welcomed. And so that's kind of how I feel trick or treat came about.
Yep.
Some of the things that we used to do as kids in Scotland was we used to dress up. I was a brownie, so we used to go to a special brownies meeting and we would dress up in costume. In our house, my mum would bake a Halloween cake and bake silver threepennies. And that's another tradition from around that 16th century time, if not earlier, where charms were baked into a cake or into a bun. And whatever charm you got, that was the prediction for your future. The other one we did, and this one I used to love as a kid, we used to go bobbing for apples. And that too was a 16th century celebration. But why apples? Well, in Celtic tradition, apples were associated with the other world and with immortality. So that's why apples were so important at that time. There are lots of things that we do today that we don't realise the story behind it. That's why I think it's kind of important to share that. Yeah,
thank you. But it's so interesting as to where our, the things we do now, where they originated from and where they came from.
And I'm sure they were around much earlier than that and other traditions, but that was the first recorded, written history, if you like, because as you know, so much of the Celtic history is not written, it's oral, and so a lot of it has been lost. Yeah.
Yeah.
What else did we want to talk about? It's a time to connect not only with our ancestors in terms of ritual, but it's also a time for those of us who are mediums or who make spiritual connection with loved ones or spirit guides, whatever names you want to use for the different deities, gods, goddesses that you might connect with. Samhain is known as the time where the veil between the realms is at its thinnest, and that includes connecting with the Fae as well. So it is a very good time to actually do some meditation to connect with either spirit guides, loved ones who've passed, and I will be doing a meditation around that as part of this series. What will you be doing as part of the series?
As part of the series, I will actually be doing a wirecraft, but in ritual, as a ritual, and in remembrance of whoever you choose to remember, and it will be a weaving.
Oh, that will be so good. I'm so looking forward to that. I think the other thing that perhaps we might like to consider too is if you're a person who believes in reincarnation and past lives, we have incarnated in different cultures at different times with different lineages. So I don't just honor, if you like, the DNA of my current incarnation, my ancestors there. I also consider and bring in, even if I don't know who they were, I bring in the universal ancestors from every life I've ever lived. So that might be something else that you might like to consider as well as part of this celebration, part of this reflection.
Yeah, yeah. And even just to look at the history of the place where you are, you know, look at the history, see who were the original custodians of the land where you live. And, you know, that's something else I like to do.
Yeah, and what were their stories?
Yeah, that's right.
Without culturally appropriating anything, but just respecting their stories, respecting the history of the land that we find ourselves on now. Yeah, absolutely. And respecting those ancestors.
Yeah,
Yeah, I love it. Well, some of the foods that are associated with Samhain, I've mentioned apples, but also pumpkins, hence carving out pumpkins. But in Scotland, we use turnips. We call them neeps. And you would carve out a turnip in the shape of a lantern, the way that is done with pumpkins today. And also pomegranates were very important then. Pomegranates were considered around rebirth and reincarnation, if I remember correctly. I haven't researched that one quite so much, so I could be wrong about that as well. What other foods do you sort of like to focus on?
Foods, as you were saying before about the people going door to door in exchange of food, quite often it's my belief that those foods were baked goods. Something that I've made like with what I am aware is a traditional recipe is soul cakes. So soul cakes were crossed. They had a cross on the top and they could be broken. So each quarter represented one of the elements and they could be broken and shared. So yeah, so that'll be another thing that I'll be sharing is the
I love that.
soul cakes, as these soul cakes also remind me very much of the rock cakes that my great pop, used to bake, which is really, so that's something that I really love. Just remembering, like when I think of that, I can still taste it. I can still smell those rock cakes. You know, he's been gone for a long time, but those rock cakes are well implanted in my memory.
Making me hungry, Mish. But you bring up a really good point. You know, there are the historical traditions when we go back and read the history of it. But what about your own personal family traditions? They are just as important, even if not more important than, you know, what was done in the 16th century or earlier than that. What are your traditions that you would like to bring into Samhain? And even if this is the first time that perhaps you're looking at celebrating any Sabbath, what tradition do you want to create for the future, for future generations as well? I think that could be really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, you know, you can, a lot of people don't know their history, you know, don't know their family history. So yeah, so making traditions,
yeah,
pass on to the future generations is really important too.
I think so. I think so. So shall we do an intentions reading for Samhain? What do you think?
Yeah, that's a great idea, because I think that's the other thing that's really done this time of year. Once you're reflecting and working out, you know, you're spending time with your shadow self, working out what you need to change, and then making that change as you're going to emerge again later.
And it is about going quite deep. And as you say, this is the time where shadow work would be really beneficial because of that veil being so thin. And, you know, we always talk about we need to look at the light and the shadow, not just the light, because we learn just as much from the shadow as we do from the light.
Yes.
All right. So, well, let's do our reading. And we're going to do it the way we normally do it. We each do a reading, and then we share the information together as well. So we've had a chat about it beforehand, and we thought we might do just what does the energy for this Samhain period look like for you? And of course, with all readings that are considered general, only take the information that resonates for you and disregard the rest. So let's start shuffling. Mish, do you want to go first this time?
Sounds good. I don't mind. I can go first. I'm going to use some runes, so excuse the noise as I just give them a little tumble. Let's start with some runes. Okay, so what are the energies going to look like this Samhain season? Okay, so I've got the, oh, I'm going to drop them. Got the harvest. I think I draw the harvest for every single Sabbath reading. I am
So
sure.
appropriate.
Yeah. So the harvest, looking at the blessings, looking at all that work that you've done over the year, and seeing the blessings that have come from it, from that hard work. And I've got the rings. The rings are about connections and all those elements. So all those little things throughout this time, connecting together and starting anew, which is perfect for this time. So yeah, well, you know, looking at seeing all those connections, all those things that you've done and how they connect and start anew, moving forward out into the new year. And the eye is about that lifting of the veil and what is going to be revealed, you know, what reveals itself to you. Spending that time, you know, connecting to spirit, or whoever it is, that whatever you call it. I say spirit, connecting to spirit, trusting that intuition and really feeling into that moving forward. So I might just grab some cards to put with each of them as well. And of course, I'm going to use the Season of the Witch, Samhain, or Samhain. I probably don't pronounce.
There are so many different pronunciations.
Samhain deck.
That's a beautiful deck.
It is. It is. And again, intuition. So trusting your intuition, knowing that you know, this is a time where that veil is at its thinnest. If you're looking forward to planning what you want to do throughout the, you know, the rest of this calendar year, or the rest of, you know, starting fresh with this this new year and all these new energies, like really do use your intuition and trust yourself, listening to those messages that you'll be, you know, that you're receiving from your guides and so on.
Nice.
And the grief card. So, you know, grief, you can look at it as grief, you know, because you're remembering the ancestors, you're remembering those who aren't here anymore in flesh. But it's also about acknowledging what in yourself hasn't come to be as you expected. You know, that grief, as we go through life, there's things that happen, and what you thought your year might have been this year, if there have been changes around that and it didn't go as planned, you know, that grief that you feel there is perfectly valid. It's the same as losing somebody. It's the same sort of hurt on the inside when you haven't been able to achieve what you wanted to do and what you've set out to do. You know, if your life as you saw it 12 months ago, it just isn't like that anymore and can't be like that, then acknowledge that grief as well. And yeah, by acknowledging that, it sort of helps you move on from that, and then you can plan forward. You know, connecting those things together, getting everything together so that you can heal and move forward from that. Does that make sense?
It does. And, you know, it's really emphasizing that this is a time of not just the light, but also of identifying with the dark, the shadow side. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. People think, oh, dark, you know, shadow, creepy, scary.
Yeah, people are
facing our own dark side is challenging.
You know, you don't deal with the darkness because that's evil.
Yeah.
That's not true.
No, it isn't. It isn't. I agree.
Okay. My very last card is the altar. Okay, setting up that sacred space. And remembering that it doesn't have to be a physical place that you set up. You know, that sacred space could just be simply sitting on your own and, you know, and just being, just that feeling of being, and just being open and connecting with what's going on around, and listening to what's coming in. And that, especially with the intuition rune, with the eye and the seeing all, you know, sitting back, devoting some of your time to actually listen, I think is very important.
And speaking of altars, I will be doing a video on how you can create a simple altar for Samhain, and it doesn't have to be anything too fancy. So I thought I'd show you a few different ways that you could do that.
That's right. That's a really great idea, Leslie, to do that.
Because we see wonderful, don't get me wrong, we see wonderful videos of these amazing altars, and they're very ornate and very complex, but it doesn't, as you say, it doesn't have to be. It's what's meaningful for you, but we'll go into that in the video. So let me have a look and see what my cards say for the energies for you for the Samhain period. And I'm using the Tarot of the Abyss deck by Anatolian. So this is a black and white deck, which I thought was appropriate for this time of year, light and dark. And the first card I have is the Three of Swords. Now, this is a card of looking back. It's interesting in this card because we've got the swords going into a book. And we spoke about Samhain being a time of reflection for the year that has gone before you start making plans for the new year. And I feel that this is definitely reconfirming what we've been talking about looking at your shadow side. Reflecting back through the year, looking back at the things that you feel haven't worked for you, and instead of beating yourself up about it, honouring that maybe that wasn't meant to be at that time, and letting it go. The reason I say that is because swords are about our thinking processes, our planning and our communication. And sometimes things are more about a divine plan rather than our earthly plan. So it is about looking back and maybe having a little ritual of letting go, that sense of loss that you may have felt over some things that might have not worked out for you during the year that's just gone. The second card I have is the Eight of Pentacles. I'm just going to bring that closer. So Pentacles are about the practical things that we do. And you can see that this is a person who has been working. He's been building the pathway. And so, again, it's also a time to look back and see what you've built through the year. What have you created that maybe you haven't celebrated for yourself? You know, it's like I hear so many people saying, oh, but I only just did this and I only just did that. No, you did something. So look at what has worked for you as well. And you can maybe treat it as two separate exercises. Do what you need to let go of. Look at what didn't work. Let it go. Grieve over it as per Mish's grief card, because we do grieve over everything that doesn't work for us at different times. And then we focus on what did work, because that's the energy that we want to carry forward through Samhain once we have released your sense of loss and grief. The third card I have is the Knight of Pentacles. Now, how appropriate. Knights are all about movement. And so this is saying, how do you practically want to move forward as we move into the dark half of the year? Do you want to move forward quietly? Do you want to really create a lot of energy and burn bright during this winter period that we're going to be moving into? Have a real think about how you want to move forward from where you are at, having released and grieved, and then looking at the successes. And that might make it easier to do any planning or any forward thinking as you move into this new season. Let's do some tea coins. I wouldn't be me if I didn't do the tea coins.
No.
So again, like Mish, we've got noise. And the first tea coin is the sword. And that interestingly goes with the Three of Swords. So this is reconfirming that you don't have to hang on to what is not working for you. We live in a world where we feel, oh, I can't stop doing that because. Really think it through. Is it truly serving you? Now, there's a lot of cliches out there about letting go what doesn't serve us, but this is about going deeper than that because we've got that full moon in Scorpio on the 6th of May. And that's about diving deep into our emotions, into our psyche and spirituality, to release, to honor what hasn't worked, because it's important to honor what hasn't worked as well, because what hasn't worked is something that we've tried and we know that that's not our direction. Let's do a tea coin for the second card to go with the Eight of Pentacles. And we've got the key. And so looking at what has worked is the key for how you will move forward. Looking at what you might want to build on as well as what you might want to start anew. And then the third tea coin to go with the Knight of Pentacles is the teacup and the saucer. And this is about celebration. Even though Sabbath is, I guess, a more somber celebration in some ways, because we're remembering those loved ones who've passed, we're remembering ancestors, it's a respectful honor. But at the same time, we are still celebrating that we had those people in our lives, celebrating that spiritually they are still there for us, even if we can't see them or hear them or touch them. So I do hope that's of help for you as you move forward. Mish, did you
definitely it's you think about all of those people who have had influence on you.
Yeah.
You've got to celebrate that because you are who you are today because of who they were and what they did.
And also honoring things that haven't worked out in the year that you've tried, honoring that you took up the challenge and you tried.
Yeah, exactly. And learning, we learn from that.
Yeah, absolutely.
You tried really hard and that didn't work. Well, maybe now it's time to just take a step back and look at it from a different perspective, and you might be able to see a different way to make it work. But it's all learning. Like it's how we grow. It's how we evolve.
Absolutely. And, our perspective can influence what an experience is or isn't. And it's unique for every person. So, Mish, did you want to do another sort of final card to round things off?
Yeah, a little finish up. So I'm going to choose just one card from Jimmy Eagle's Awaken deck. It's one of my favorite decks here. This is a lovely deck to work with as well as to read from. It's revision. So that goes with, put that behind so you can see it. That goes with everything that we've just said. It's revision. It's looking at it from a different perspective. And the little note at the bottom says, my energy flows freely. So it's trusting in that free flowing energy and everything goes on. It is a circle. It's a cycle.
That's a beautiful deck.
Thank you.
A lot of movement in that card.
What are you choosing your?
Okay, so I'm going to use the Wild Woman Oracle, which is a recent addition to my collection. And I thought it was appropriate for Samhain. So let's see what we've got. Oh, wow. Now, I actually did a card for myself this morning and it was the same card. So that's really interesting. So that's what the card looks like. Let me not bring it too far forward. And the words are rewilding with Grandmother Moon. And so this is saying to me that this is not just about getting out in nature. This is about connecting with nature much more deeply. And I don't mean just going and hugging a tree, which I think is a wonderful thing to do because I like doing that. But this is really connecting with the nature of who you are deep in your own psyche at the deepest level. And the fact that it's rewilding with Grandmother Moon is also how internally can you connect with your ancestors more fully? How can you bring them closer to you perhaps than they have been? And, you know, people say, oh, but it's just my imagination when something happens. Imagination is the gateway to intuition. It is also the gateway to spiritual connection. So consider that. So when you think something's your imagination, doesn't mean that it doesn't have an energetic relationship to you. So, yeah, so that's the final card. Isn't it gorgeous? I'll bring it closer again.
Another so nice with it being full moon.
And it has that full moon there. And so full moon in Scorpio, kind of like a grandmother moon, because we are moving into the crone energy now. You know, we are moving into that winter period of crone energy.
Fullest at its max.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we hope you've enjoyed the readings. We hope you've enjoyed our little chat about Samhain, and we look forward to presenting some more videos for you. And we wish you many beautiful blessings as you journey into the light side of yourself and into the shadow side of yourself.
Yeah, bountiful blessings, everybody, and be kind on yourselves. Thank you.